Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest public webinar. Our topic today is learning ways to manage stress in a changed world. And we have an expert panel joining us today, as well as members of the Canada Life Organizational Health Team who are going to ask them questions that we believe are at the top of everybody's mind. As you listen, you're welcome to note your questions in the Q&A in either English or French. We'll be monitoring and we'll try our best to cover your questions during today's session. We have arranged for French interpretation services, so if you'd like to listen to French audio for today's session, you can access French interpretation by calling the number showing on your screen, and we've also placed this information in the Q&A for you. If you do that, please be sure to mute your computer audio. I'd like to begin by introducing Marianne Baynton, who's going to introduce you to our expert panel for today's event. Marianne?
Yes, thanks, Laura. Now, you can see their bios in the invitation that you got, and these are all very dynamic, entrepreneurial women who I really admire. So instead of giving you their CV, I'm going to tell you who they really are. So I'll start with Amanda. Amanda is a good friend from Texas, and she is one of the people who has convinced me that mindfulness isn't about staring at raisins, but really about centering yourself. And I've been able to watch her starting up her business and really expanding it into the field of psychological safety and beyond. And Amanda is an inspiration to me. The next person on our panel is Dr. Joti Samra, who has been instrumental in really helping develop and shape some of the really comprehensive resources for guarding minds at work, for psychologically safe leader assessment, for an emotional intelligence self-assessment. But she is also somebody, I call her my soul sister, because we really align with our passion about the work that we do and how we can make a difference. Joti's a psychologist by training, and she is a psychologist who really cares about the well-being of people everywhere. And Eva and I have had the pleasure of working together for only a few years, but she also is a very dynamic entrepreneur who really helps to shape organizations' ability to attract and retain employees from the Indigenous community. But she does so much more than what she gets paid for. She is truly a compassionate, kind, caring soul who wants to make a difference for so many people. So if I sound a little excited, it's because I am. These are three women that I admire who have influenced me and who continue to inspire me. So with that, we can go back to Kim, who's going to have the first question for our panel.
Thanks, Marianne. I'm really excited to be here as well today to hear what everybody has to say. So my first question is, we're hearing people talk about struggling to deal with the changing world, and things have become highly politicized. Unintentional actions can have real and public consequences. And as we return to our changed workplaces and try to reconnect with coworkers we may not have seen in a while, or connect with new coworkers we've never actually met, how do we build open relationships without the fear of unintentionally offending someone? How do we approach conversations about vaccines in a way to build bridges and not walls? How do employees engage with each other when there's a difference of opinion that are exposed? So Marianne, I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts and recommendations are for us.
Oh, thanks, Kim. So I will start this one because it's something that I've thought about a lot. And first of all, we have to always think about what is the outcome that we're looking for when we engage in any conversation. And have you ever changed your mind about something because somebody says you're wrong and I'm right? Where I look at this topic is that it's about where our fears lie. Some people are afraid of COVID, the effect that it could have on them or their loved ones. Therefore, they go and get a vaccine. Some people are afraid of the damage that the vaccine could do for themselves and for their loved ones, and therefore they avoid the vaccine. And in both of these cases, we are fear-driven, and I know the argument is, well, the science says, but we all know that science is never 100%. And the point is that people should be allowed to choose what's right for them as long as it's not going to harm other people. So if we can come to this as from a place of compassion, from a place of wanting to understand, while still protecting yourself, then I think we can actually move forward in a way that's better for everyone. So Amanda, what's your thoughts on this topic? There you are.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So I definitely agree with everything that you've said. And I think that when it comes to a situation like this, we all have to step back and have our own level of self-awareness, just like what you're saying, addressing what is that fear that we're holding and that we're bringing in, and what is it that is making this such a triggering topic for us. So I think that if we take time and begin to become aware of why something triggers us, right? And then I also think taking time to think about some of those scenarios that we might walk into and how we may best navigate them. And coupled with that, I also think that making sure that we're taking time to self and emotionally regulate when we do experience these different things and before we experience these different things, so that when we do inevitably have to face one of these conversations, we're not necessarily coming from a place of reactivity, but we can respond and we can be well informed on why and how we may be responding to something a different way. Now, I think when you mentioned something about fears, we also have to look at how, we have to come in and have a level of compassion and understanding for each other and really take time to recognize that we are all just trying to get through something really hard, and that maybe we might be able to learn something from listening to another person's perspective. So leading with the intention of seeking to understand versus trying to prove a point and trying to force someone to understand your view might take you a lot further than trying to force someone to change their opinion in just the slight amount of time that you have with them.
That's great, Amanda. Thank you. Eva, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I totally agree that, taking the time to listen to other people's perspective is really key, because we don't know, with COVID, there are a lot of fears out there, and we have family members at home that have underlying health conditions, but you never know the other person's perspective unless you take the time to listen to and hear from them.
Yes, thank you. And Joti, well, you must be dealing with clients who have all sorts of issues around these topics too.
Yeah, absolutely. A really important topic for us to be considering. And I would just really underscore all of the wonderful comments that the panel has made so far. And the pieces that I would add are, to recognize that this isn't the first, and nor will it be the last issue in our life that we have some difference of opinion on with people. And from a social psychological standpoint, we know when we have fear, when we have the level of intensity of all of the things that we're seeing, in our media, in our workplaces, the decisions that we're being faced with, naturally, and from an adaptive standpoint, what happens is we become polarized. So when our emotions are heightened, our brain actually thinks about things in a different way, and we're much more likely to take shortcuts in our thinking. And that's adaptive for good reason in some situations, but when we're faced with something where there is so much polarization, where there is so much potential and actuality of impact on our relationships, we need to recognize that self-awareness piece that Amanda was saying is really critical. So recognize, self-regulate, identify what your core needs are from your work environment, from your manager, supervisor, from your family member that may share a different opinion, and then approach that from a place of inquisitive inquiry, right? Take responsibility for your feelings and emotions around it, but approach it with compassion and kindness and empathy.
Great, thanks, Joti. Yeah, complex topic, but I think we can do better in the way we approach it with each other. Audrey, I think you have the next question for us.
Yes, thank you, Marianne. Many of us feel like we've already been dealing with significant change. Whether we shift to working from home or had to work wearing PPE and following COVID protocols, our work environment changed and we've needed to adjust accordingly. We thought would be feeling so much better. However, things quite turn out the way we had hoped. So this fourth wave has left some people feeling defeated when they had hoped to feel energized. So as we enter the fall and winter months, how do we stay resilient to cope with even more? Amanda, what do you think?
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, great. So the first thing that I would focus on again is that acknowledgement and acceptance piece, and just acknowledging that what we are experiencing is very real, and we are all experiencing things like pandemic fatigue and different impacts that are lingering from the pandemic in our own ways, and that's okay. I think that it's important for us to grieve the things that we feel like we've lost and to take our time to process through those different, powerful emotions that we've had, and allow ourselves to move into a space of acceptance and, with time, allowing ourselves to process, and then with time, letting go of the things that we cannot control. And through all of that, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, practicing self-care, practicing that self and emotional regulation, and giving ourselves opportunity to process out some of that emotion. So we have to remember that we don't just store stress and traumatic experiences in our minds, we also store them in our bodies. So I always say our issues are in our tissues. So please make sure that you're moving, make sure that you are doing the different things that help you to process out those emotional experiences. Things like journaling. I know I'm really firm in my morning routine. It doesn't even matter what time of the day I get up, but I know that when I do that for myself, I can address the day from a healthier standpoint. I'm more resilient to the things that come my way inevitably because I feel more grounded myself. And then, it's okay if you need to reach out and get additional support. Please tap into your EAP, talk to a trusted advisor. You do not have to sit and process all of this alone. We are all trying to get through it. And there are so many amazing resources, just like you see here on this panel with Canada Life and Workplace Strategies for Mental Health, that can help you to cope and find strategies to navigate this very real experience.
Thanks a lot, Amanda. Joti, what have you got to add to the wintertime coping strategies?
Yeah, so a few things to recognize as I'm a research scientist at heart, and as I often say, numbers do not lie. And so many of us have heard of the 1 out of 5, every year of Canadian workers that will experience or meet criteria for one of the primary mental health issues, with anxiety and depression being at the top of those lists. The estimates for this year are 40%. So the data tells us 40% of us would meet diagnostic criteria for depression or anxiety this year. So recognize that one is we're not alone with the things that we're experiencing. We're seeing many patients in our practice that, will say, I don't know, I feel okay, and I'm, maybe I'm safe, and maybe I have a job, but I don't know. I am just feeling so, and then we can fill in the blanks, not myself, overwhelmed, anxious, and here's what we know from our health behaviors. We are drinking more, 25% increase conservatively. We are moving less. The quarantine 15 is a real thing, and so all those good self-care things, right? Eat your fruits and vegetables, drink lots of water. And I know my Achilles heel is sleep. Our silly devices and our work that we're connected to every drop of every day now, can be wonderful because it can let us do things like this in this unique environment. But they're also having really tangible impacts on our neurochemistry and our circadian rhythms. And so be thoughtful of the stuff that you can control. And what we put in our mouth, what we drink, and how much we sleep is all within our control.
Yeah, that mind-body connection, people think they're two different things, but they're actually all housed together and they work together. So Eva, what about you? What do you suggest for getting us through this winter?
I think it was difficult for me, and as for many, but what I practiced a lot of every day was gratefulness, and to get up and I carry a little rock with me. We call them grandfathers in our culture. And every time I touch that little rock, I give thanks for 5 things. But every morning, and I've been doing this for many, many years because I consider myself a pretty spiritual person. And I give thanks for breath because I deal with underlying health problems such as asthma. And then I give thanks for the roof over my head and all the other little things, the shoes on my feet, all of the things that, you know, we always think materialistic things, you know, but it's when you start practicing gratefulness, you look at life in a different way and not focusing on the challenges of the day, but what life has already provided to you. And that has really helped. And, you know, I share that with everyone by giving out little grandfathers, you know, to people to help them, remind them to give thanks for good health, you know, that they might be in good health, or just, you know, food on, you know, clothing on their backs and food that they're eating. So I think that has really helped me for sure, and others that I've shared that with.
That's great. And I agree and have used all of these. In addition, I find that the more I focus on helping other people, the easier it is for me to cope. And some of that's just strictly distraction because you're not thinking about what you don't have. But some of it is actually the feel-good hormones or chemicals that I get from knowing that I'm helping someone else. And then the other thing that I learned from our Danish friends is this concept. It's spelled Hygge, but it's pronounced, I think, Hygge. And it's the idea of making your surroundings cozy so that when you're trapped inside, you don't feel trapped. You feel like it's warm, it's soft, you wear clothing that's comfortable, you have lighting that you enjoy, and you do things that bring you joy. And that helped a lot as well. So hopefully some of these things, but I think getting outside is probably the number one for me. But hopefully all of these ideas will help people. Carolyn, you've got our next question for us.
Hi, everyone. My question is really around how workplaces can balance health and safety with the need to recognize individual concerns. Workplaces are implementing new policies, not just health and safety, but other policies that relate to differences in the way we're working going forward. So in doing that, what steps can they take to make sure that people are treated equitably rather than equally, and recognizing and responding to diverse needs? Eva, could you start us off with that?
Can't hear you, Eva.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So when we look at wellness in the workplace, it's not just warding off, you know, the colds and the flus. It's really a holistic approach. And when I talk about holistic, I'm talking about the physical, the spiritual, the environment that Marianne talked about, the intellect, the occupational, and just the mental wellness of everyone in general. And so wellness has to be promoted within company policies. And so, and when you do that, the benefit isn't only held with the employee, but it is beneficial to the organization or company that you're working with, because when you create an environment that promotes wellness of all those areas that I spoke of, is that you reduce absenteeism, you increase the productivity, you decrease stress, you attract new employees where their other employees are saying, you know, it's great to work here and come in and work here because of the environment that they work in. And of course that leads to retaining employees and all. But I think it's really important to consult, always consult with your employees on how they're feeling in the workplace, and and one way that we do it, because I come from a smaller organization and workplaces, that we're able to do that more one-on-one. And where, you know, the big corporations that we work with, they have to look at doing, you know, broader surveys with their employees, and how are they going to implement that within their policies. And of course, you need to get buy-in, and the buy-in is not just with employees, but that is your management, your boards might be to talk through some of those concerns of resistance that might be taking place. And in order to have a good work-life balance and to be successful, of course, like I said, it has to be from the employees and the senior management. And I know that, you know, I always look at challenges as opportunities to grow knowledge. And so, and through that talking through and those surveys, we could learn a lot from that. And of course, you know, promoting wellness within your organizations is key to keep that balance. And, you know, I always do a check-in. I do a weekly check-in with my staff, and you could view that as an evaluation, an ongoing evaluation of how things are going for them. I'm able to do that. You know, within larger organizations, they have departments where they can come in and meet and see how everybody's coping, and look for those inside personal perspectives of views of how they're managing within their units even. And another good practice is, you know, is to reduce and promote good wellness or reduce vicarious trauma, I guess, on your staff, is ramp up. Hire more managers if that's what's needed, then increase your hiring so that your employees feel supported through all of that. And what else do I have here? And to remember that flexibility, you know, the myth is that flexibility is unfair and inequitable, where there needs to be, some organizations need to think that needs to be a one-size-fits-all solution to be flexible. So the reality is that everyone has different needs, and so the solution is very personable. So different people need different forms of flexibility at different points of their lives. So so to be content, other people are content with the real structure and, you know what exactly what's going to take place in the work week. And yeah, I hope that answered your question. Oh,
no,
also,
yeah, go ahead, Eva.
Yeah, just to add is, you know, to develop a plan, incorporate those into your procedures. Do trial periods. We've done trial periods. We call them pilots, and start small. You know, don't try and move slowly into that. And, you know, those evaluations and surveys will help manage how you're going to move forward.
Yeah, that I agree 100%. If we just ask people how we can support them to do their job, we don't have to worry about, are we being inclusive? Because when you ask rather than tell, you are being inclusive, no matter what the differences are. So Joti, well, what would you have to add to that?
Yeah, I would add, you know, really important for us to recognize that it is impossible for us to have a healthy and safe work environment if our workers are not healthy and safe. And so we've learned many, many lessons over the last 18 months. And one big one has been that our organizations are not just bricks and mortar, right? They're individuals. And so we also need to recognize that while COVID, of course, has been the big main show feature over the last 18 months, there have been many things happening all the way from the social political climate that we've seen, not just, you know, to our friendly neighbors to the south, but in our country. And the impact impact of that has been that many groups, those that are marginalized and vulnerable, are struggling more. Members of visible, ethnic, or culturally diverse minorities, members of the BIPOC community, members of the LGBTQ+ community. And so we have an imperative to make sure that we are extra thoughtful in recognizing, especially for those that are customer facing right now, emotions are heightened every which way. And there are some really awful things happening even in our beautiful country here of Canada. And so pay extra attention and make sure those one-to-ones can't underscore enough. And, you know, in person is best. Obviously, most of us are not able to do that. Video is second, you know, voice if you have to, but let's stay away from just email and text. We need to find other ways to connect, so we won't know what people are struggling with if we don't have those connections.
Great, thanks, Jodi. Amanda, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, so actually it's just kind of piggybacking on what we've already heard, which is ask open-ended questions and don't just assume, and allow yourselves to actually understand what it is that your employees are experiencing. So whether, you know, you're doing that via survey, I think it's always great to collect quantitative and qualitative data. So yes, the numbers are great, and also being able to understand and take their words and be able to interpret that and make changes from that. Also doing things like roundtables and town halls can be really great, just to give people that space where they feel like they can talk. But for them to be able to feel open and trust you, of course, we have to have a level of psychological safety that is present in the workplace for them to be able to feel comfortable speaking up and feeling supported. I definitely would suggest not forcing it. And especially when it comes to, like Jodi was speaking about, different diverse populations and how we're serving and showing up for them. Please don't force people to, you know, justify their existence. Open the space for them to be able to speak. Show them that, you know, that you are listening, that you are acting on the things that they're saying, instead of just letting them, you know, talk and then they still don't see any changes. So be very intentional about the way that you navigate the space that you create and the questions that you're asking and how you're going to respond to your employees.
Yeah, I just want to share, early next year, we are doing a huge national survey looking at how diverse populations experience psychological health and safety in the workplace. And then we're going to host those roundtables you're talking about, Amanda, bringing each of the groups together individually to say, what could we do differently? So I'm excited about that, and it'll be a way for us to all move forward. Michelle, I think you've got the next question for us.
Thanks, Marianne. In workplaces that deal with the public, we're hearing a lot of stories of heightened emotions and aggressive behavior, often directed at workers who are simply asking that patrons or patients adhere to health and safety protocols. Whether it's restaurant workers, grocery store workers, or frontline healthcare workers just trying to come and go from their workplaces, these workers may continue to struggle as they face these behaviors, and they'll need the support of their workplaces. What can workplaces do to protect their employees from this type of behavior? Dr. Samra, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, great question, and very important question, which is creating all kinds of angst and distress and having impacts on things like how likely people want to be to stay at organizations if this is not being addressed. So a few things. First and foremost, identify where your organization stands, right? You know, what are the parameters and policies, right, become important, and a policy is just worth the paper that it's written on. And so policy isn't just about having written words, but it's making sure that you are really making sure you're communicating through your organization to your staff where your organization stands from a value standpoint. First of all, what's okay, what's not, you know, what kind of behaviors are unacceptable. Now, that being said, is we can only control what we can control. And the reality is, for many sectors right now, there isn't a control that the organization is going to have on the, you know, public, say, member or client or customer that's communicating out. So we're going to have a few limited degrees of freedom there. And that, I think the effect that I'm seeing with organizations is they're so overwhelmed, they'll say, well, I can't control, you know, the other person. So therefore, what they do is they become a bit paralyzed and take no action, and that is unhelpful. And so let your staff know what is okay and not. that, connect with your staff about what their needs are. And so the things that we're hearing in our patient practice is workers that will say, I can't go speak to my boss about this. There's not even a space for an open dialogue. I don't have a voice around this. Ignoring the conversations isn't going to make them go away. Recognize some of the things that we can control is equip our staff with some of the skills that can help them regulate emotion and be able to calm themselves, right? And recognize that a big percentage of our population, a third of us, will have dealt with adverse childhood experiences, so big bad stuff in our backgrounds. And so that customer screaming in your face might not just be something that we can easily dismiss. It might be really triggering for all kinds of reasons. And so recognize that it's really important to do those one-to-one check-ins again. Ask what would help and push out as many supports as you can. Group benefits, tons of things, of course, on the workplace strategy site, on our My Workplace Health site. We've got lots of workbooks and toolkits, and so push out useful information.
Yeah, thank you. Joti, both you and Amanda use the term regulate and self-regulate. And for our listeners, this is just simply being able to manage how you respond, both how it feels to you physically and emotionally and how it appears to others. And as Joti just said, there's so much free information that's out there that there's no reason that we can't support each other to learn and grow in this way. So Eva, what would you have to add to this conversation?
I think, education is really key. Educating your employees how to deal with difficult clients in these times. And when they have those skills, when those incidents arise, then they're not being triggered. Then they realize that this is not theirs to deal with, that this person is dealing with anxiety for whatever reason it might be, but that they can handle it in a capable way that, can de-escalate the situation quite quickly. But most times I find when people are angry and yelling, taking the time to take them aside and listen and really hear what their concern is. Feedback is feedback, whether it's negative or positive. And so I always think, the negative is, again, a challenge, is an opportunity to deal with something that we might not have known how to deal with before, and that the companies can certainly benefit on saying that, okay, this arise today, and it could possibly arise in the future. So how do we deal with this? Or it's happening more, and talking with the employees, are they feeling capable in dealing with that? And if not, then, finding those resources to help them deal with it in a professional way, because you want the client to come back. It is all about experience. And if their experience is a good one, that they feel validated and heard, then they will likely come back.
Yeah, Eva, that reminds me, management feedback 101, don't tell them what they did wrong, tell them what you want them to do instead. And that's what you just described. It's just how we give feedback that matters in terms of how people respond to it. Thank you. And Amanda, what have you got to share with us?
Thank you. I would just add, well, supporting what both of them just said, it's just, communicating the expectations. It came to mind this quote I've seen floating around on the internet that says, the whole world is experiencing a shortage. Be kind to those who show up. And I think as we think about our employees and the people who are on the front line, and when you think back to what they signed up for versus what they are currently having to experience, any time that management can step in and truly show that they have their employees back, that they can handle situations rather than putting the employee in front of them and expecting them to figure it out, will obviously be a lot more helpful. So just being consistent with your expectations, the expectations of the employee, the expectations of yourself, the expectations and consequences of those who show up and behave in that way, and just being more supportive, and like Joti said, making sure that those employees are feeling heard.
Yeah, it's not a big ask, really. for us to do that. So thank you very much for that. And I'm going to go back to Laura because she's going to have some questions for us that came from our audience.
Thanks, Marianne. And yeah, we've had lots of questions. It's kept us very busy scrolling through and taking a look. And we're not going to have time to get to all of them, but I wanted to get to some that have been kind of voted up with the most likes, I guess, the highest level of interest. So the first one has to do with listening to each other's perspective. So we take the time to listen to other people's perspective, but what if they don't do the same? And this is in relation to perhaps family discussions. And of course, we're coming up on Thanksgiving weekend. There might be lots of family discussions around the table. So maybe that's a good question to take on right now. Great. Eva, do you want to give that question a try there and what you think? How do we listen? When somebody doesn't seem to be listening to us?
Yeah, I mean, within my own family, you know, we have one family member that is reluctant to get the vaccine, and with my mother having underlying health concerns right now, it's brought up a discussion. And so, and for whatever reason, and I think, you know, having a sit-down conversation with him and understanding what it is that, you know, fears that lie within and why, you know, he's reluctant to do that and why, and then, you know, being really open. And so what I said to him was, I said, you know, I want to learn, I want to understand why you're choosing not to, because my concern is our mother. But the concern is for his well-being too. And I said, as long as you're willing to listen to mine, you know, and so he says, okay. And so I was very clear on what our conversation was going to be about up front, because I wanted to make sure that he was open and willing to listen from my perspective, because I care for my mother and I love my mother, you know, and so as does he. But, you know, I think it's being clear that we're going to have a conversation on this, and that let's listen to both sides and be open about it.
So you set the rules before you even begin what you know could be a contentious conversation. That's great. Yeah. Thanks. Laura, what's your next question? Another one about caregiving, I think. What if you're worn out from helping others or being other people's support system? What can you do to re-energize yourself? Yeah, Amanda, that sounds like a good one for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think especially if you are a caregiver and someone who shows so much care, and, you know, or you're maybe around other stressed people or stressed populations a lot, your need for self-care automatically skyrockets, right? So I think one thing that I always like to encourage you to do is just on the front end, always making sure that you're proactively taking care of yourself. And that may look a lot of different ways for you. So like I said, for me, my morning routine is so crucial to me being able to show up and be my best self and to be supportive and to be able to pour into other people. I think, you know, a lot of times when it comes to self-care, people think it's selfish because other people have, you know, bigger things going on and I need to show up for these people. But I actually think it's even more selfish when you don't do that and you dare to show up and pour from a, you know, from an even emptier cup. So taking care of yourself, whatever that looks like for you, making sure that you're taking that time to recharge. I know Marianne mentioned getting outside, even mentioned practicing gratitude. I've mentioned breathing and stretching, you know, and even Joti talking about processing and self and emotionally regulating. All of these different strategies are really great. And the last thing I want to add is I also understand that sometimes, especially when you have your own job, your own issues, other people's issues, you know, your kids and coworkers that act like kids and all of those things, right? When you have all of these things that are on your plate, it is even more important for you to scatter some little things throughout the day. Sometimes we're really busy, so we feel like we don't have time to take care of ourselves. So if you can stop in between when you have to do something for yourself and something for someone else, and just take a few grounding deep breaths, check in with yourself, ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? How am I feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? Am I experiencing tension? Do I need a break? Do I need some water? Have I eaten today? Ask yourself and check in with yourself and see how you can better show up for yourself first, and then use that to be able to show up for everyone else. Thank you.
That's great, Amanda. I just want to add, as a caregiver, when I was told to take care of myself, I wanted to scream because I felt like I couldn't, but those grounding breaths were good. But the thing that actually changed the most for me is when I stopped operating from fear that I was not going to save my loved one's life and started operating out of love for that person and just saying, I'm going to love you the best I can every day. That shifted my thinking in a way that was healthy for me. Thanks. Laura?
So I think we have time for just one more question, and there are several that have to do with social isolation and moving into the winter and how to cope, but also tied to, you know, the role that the workplace can play, particularly when people may be working virtually. Not everybody is, of course, but just any comments on the social isolation piece.
Great. Joti, can you handle that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And so a few things. One is recognize, especially as we move into our shorter days, this season is a time that a significant percentage will experience lower mood and other symptoms that start to come up as the days get shorter and we're isolated, especially for those of us that may be single, living alone, have gone through a recent death or divorce or separation. There's a few more risks to our mental health. We are fundamentally social creatures, and yes, we are physically distancing still and may will for some time, but we can remain socially connected. And so I know for, you know, a lot of us, especially those of us that have been fortunate enough to be able to transition to working from home, which is not a panacea for everybody. I saw a few comments come in, and we need to recognize that that home environment is actually not an ideal one for about 25% of households in Canada. And so we need to check in on our opinions there as well. But recognize that we have an imperative need to connect. And one of the most important things, in addition to all the good stuff of getting some movement and eating your fruits and vegetables and getting good sleep, is find ways to connect with those that matter most to you. And, you know, jump on a video. I know we're zoomed out. I am sick of it. It's the last thing I feel like doing when I'm done work and Zoom meetings, but we need to, right? We need to connect and not just texting and communicating. So I'd say just go really heavy on finding a way that fits your comfort level right now. Identify what your core needs there are, but be able to be intentional about making a commitment to increase amount of social connection.
That's great, Joti. And I think from an employer's perspective is that they can create opportunities. I know some will do, we call it parallel work, where you've got a meeting on, but the cameras are off, the microphones are off, but you know the other people are working on the other end, so you can just come on and say, hey, how you doing? There's also things like coffee breaks, where every time you have this set coffee break with you don't know who, but you get to chat about anything but work. So there's, you know, people play scavenger hunt games or they'll do trivia, but these social things, I think employers are understanding more and more, are important when we're working virtually. So Laura, are we out of time?
We're pretty much out of time, but thank you so much to our esteemed panel for your expertise. And also thanks to everyone who took the time to listen today and to contribute your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but there were a lot of great comments and questions. Remember to look for a recording of this session in English and French on the Workplace Strategies for Mental Health YouTube channel. Several of you asked about a link, and I couldn't post it in the chat, unfortunately, but if you just go to YouTube and search for Workplace Strategies for Mental Health, it comes right up. And until next time rather, stay safe.